This is Dianne Andrews in Black and White. The issues you don't want to talk about. The arts and entertainment you need to know. And now here's your host, Dianne Andrews.
Welcome to Dianne Andrews in Black and White. I'm your host, Dianne Andrews. Thanks for joining us today, and I think I've got a show that will rock your world, as they say. This is a story about the Ku Klux Klan, and specifically the Silver Dollar Group, which I had never heard of, and I'm from Louisiana. I came across this story from LSU Cold Cases, and the story was picked up by the Advocate, and I saw it, and I said, I want to do that. In fact, I've tried to invite David Duke on this show. I like to hear everybody's different opinions. And then you come into the middle. I have two guests with me. One is David LaPlante, a former LSU cold case. He wrote this case on Debra Taylor. Thank you, Debra, for being here. A very courageous woman whose father, thanks for being here. Her father was a suspected murderer, and he was an avid member of the Silver Dollar Group. And they were from around 1964 to 1969 for 5 years and committed many murders in Adams County, Mississippi, around Natchez, and in Concordia Parish, which is Faraday. And I still go through there going home, because I'm from a little town in northern Louisiana. To get there from Baton Rouge, you go through there. And I had heard years ago that it was a terrible place to get stopped, and thank goodness I never got stopped there, especially for black people, because during that time people disappeared for various reasons. David was good enough to write this cold case story after Debra, after so many years of not wanting to live with the things that her father had done. And you have to give her a lot of courage to come out and tell that story. And the Advocate newspaper picked it up here in Louisiana. David went to LSU, as I said, and he is now, he majored in PR and public relations, and he is now out of college this year working in PR in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So, Debra was born, you were born in Harrisburg, somewhere in Concordia Parish, right?
I was born in Fort Polk.
Fort Polk, okay. And where did you move to? When did you move into Concordia Parish?
It was Catahoula Parish,
Catahoula.
and that's where my father's from. I lived there most of my life.
Now, Debra, your father was abusive, not just to other people, but to you all, to his family. How he talked to you, how he treated you. Because I once asked you, how could, you be coming from what I call a malignant environment of hate, was what he was, because he hated black people. He hated anybody different, it seemed, and he beat you all, right? He used to beat his kids. It's you. What do you have, 2 brothers? How many brothers is it? How many?
I have 3 whole brothers, 3 half brothers, and a half sister.
Now, Debra still managed, after coming out of that malignant environment of hate, as I call it, to come as a mature person, be a certified nursing assistant. She worked in Angola, the largest prison in the world here around Baton Rouge, and she also ran a home health agency. Now she lives outside the state. That's why she is being Skyped in. But some of the stories, tell them some of the stories about the little boy that you told me about, that was in your class, and the little black boy, that you were coming home being innocent, and what happened. Let's tell our audience about that, Debra.
That was 1969. It was the first year that our high school integrated, and he was in our typing class, and he had just wrote an innocent note, and it was addressed to a white girl there. I told somebody about it, and it got back to my father, and they shot his house, surrounded his house, and shot it full of shotgun blast, and burned the cross, and terrorized the family.
And did they say anything about don't talk to white girls, or they just, the black family knew, or did they make a statement to them also? Did they verbally say anything to them?
I don't know.
Mm-hmm. But your father told you about it? He bragged about what he had done to the black people?
Right.
And you said you always felt guilty about that, but it wasn't your fault. I mean, you were a kid. David, what did you think, being a young white man, writing this story about what happened in the Ku Klux Klan in Louisiana and Mississippi, what did you think? Never being so young and far removed from the 60s and not knowing much about it, what did you think? It's like a different world?
Well, I knew just firsthand from my parents' experience when they were children growing up. My mother's from Bogalusa, which was, as you know, a hotbed of a lot of this, unrest, things like that. I had a little bit of a taste for it, but I never knew until I started working on this project just how bad these things were, how widespread they were, and how easy it was for people to get away with violence against black people in the 60s.
Right.
Especially
Jewish
in these
people
smaller
also.
places.
They killed Jewish people who came down to help in the civil rights too. Anybody different, it almost seemed like Yankees, they hated them. But if you were white, they may not kill you.
Right.
Yeah.
But for me, that was the most, I guess, rewarding part of this project, was just learning about the history of my own state that most people don't want to talk about, want to ignore, want to pretend was a lot longer ago than it really was.
And, and I won't say it's nothing like it was, but there's still some small pockets of that in America and in Louisiana. But I don't think they can get away with it as easily as they did back then. There's a story that Stanley Nelson told me, who has written a book. He is the editor of Concordia Sentinel, which is Faraday, right?
Right. That's
See, I was thinking you were in Concordia Parish, but Catahoula is where you're from, which is, what cities are in Catahoula?
Harrisonburg, Jonesville.
Jonesboro? Oh,
Jonesville.
Jonesville. So, but you all used to come to that shoe shop that Frank Morris owned, the black guy that Silver Dollar Group killed, they think. You used to come down there to his shoe shop, right?
In Faraday,
yeah, in Concordia.
Concordia Parish.
Yeah, because I talked to Stanley Nelson, the editor of the Concordia Sentinel, who's been doing a lot of work, and David talked to him a lot as he was writing in this your cold case. And he's written a book named Devil's Walking about the Silver Dollar Group. And your father is heavily, James Sonny Taylor is heavily in that book. And there's some things that he said that he thought because I spoke with Stanley, I called him on this, because I'm going to get him on the show too, because I want to do something. He's also got the Deacons of Defense in this book, because as the Silver Dollar Group was 64 to 69, the Deacons of Defense, which were black people mostly in Jonesboro and Bogalusa, who armed themselves, and Martin Luther King denounced them because they never killed one person. But if you gonna come and threaten me and my family, they say, we're gonna threaten you also. They never had to kill anybody, but they shot at a lot of people, and they used to shoot and break up Klan meetings. So they were really tough people. In fact, I found one in Jonesboro that I'm going to, he's still living. And the mayor of Jonesboro, Mr. Bradford, that's his, he's got a cousin who was a Deacon of Defense. They did a movie about that one, but Silver Dollar Group, I bet that turns into a movie. He said your father, Urkel Boyd, who was very good friends with Frank Lewis, the black guy that got killed because he was dating a white lady back then, is what they think. But Urkel Boyd said he told the other Klansmen he was his friend, and he wanted to know who killed him, because there was never an order to kill him, and 2 Klans people disappeared. So it seems to have been honor among hatred there, because he liked Frank Mars, the shoe shop owner, the black guy who was killed. And whoever killed him, the Klan didn't have an order to kill them. But tell us, Debbie, what your father used to tell you they did to black people back then. When they killed them.
The first time he told me was 20 years ago, when I went to get him and take care of him before he died. He told me that they wrapped black men up in barbed wire and threw them in the bayou, and I asked him why. I meant, why would you kill people? And he thought I meant why barbed wire, and he said it was where their bodies wouldn't float up.
The bodies wouldn't come up, they'd get caught in something down at the bottom of the river in the bayou, right? And so they stayed down there. You know, and when you told me that, I said, I wonder if they were alive or dead when they put them down there in the water. He never told you we killed them first, or they may have wrapped them in barbed wire, made them suffer, and then put
how
them
the conversation came up is he was feeling sorry for himself, and he said, I wonder if maybe I shouldn't be like some of those blanks we threw in the bayou and wrapped up barbed wire and threw in the bayou if it shouldn't have been me instead.
Did he die? Did he die? You said he said some of those blacks that we put into the river in barbed wire, we wrapped them and put them in. And Debbie, how did you manage, and your brothers, not to be like him? You know, growing up in this malignant environment, how did you turn out, and you even took care of him before he died in 1988? How did you hate him at one time, or?
I hate him and everything he stood for.
What about your brothers?
My oldest brother, all I can say is he pretty well ruined my brother's lives, teaching them to try to follow in his footsteps. Oldest brother is deceased, and he hated him too. I mean, they had a lot of tie-ins and everything, but yeah, he pretty well messed up their heads too, teaching them to steal and hate people and all kind of bad stuff.
So Debbie, I think that, and if this is the wrong connotation I'm getting of what I read on the blog, did he abuse you? Was it verbally, domestically, sexually? Did he sexually abuse you?
He tried.
Mm-hmm. Your own father?
No, he came in drunk and made me lie down beside him, and I jumped up and ran and hid in a old rug out in the wash house from him.
Debbie, now your mother left him when you were how old?
I was 7.
And then he remarried to another lady after that?
Yes.
Was she mean to you also?
She was not mean to us, but she wasn't allowed to interfere with his making us mind and discipline and everything. She wasn't allowed. She kept him from probably beating us to death several times.
From beating you to death?
Yeah.
You had a real jewel for a father.
Yeah.
It's a very sad story, but I remember when we talked the other day, I said, you know, how did you, when you know, people talk about him, and how did you manage to be who you are and know who you are with that kind of a parent? But when he was so mean to you, it wasn't difficult for you, because you probably loved him in a way because he is your father, but you hated him as a person and what he stood for, right, Deborah?
Right.
Now, Deborah, you called LSU, you all, David, the cold case, trying to solve, which murders were those, David, that you all were trying to solve, she was trying to solve?
Our program started in after the Emmett Till Unsolved Civil Rights Crime Act in 2007. That was an act that the Congress, the United States Congress passed to authorize the FBI to open more than 112 different files that were originally closed in the 60s that had to do with murders and different things like that. The FBI originally was called in to investigate, but for plenty of reasons couldn't get any footholds in South Louisiana and North Louisiana.
It was like a cult. They weren't talking on each other. Number one, they were scared of each other.
That's correct. So in 2007, they opened up all those cases, and several different law schools and civil rights groups tried to do some investigation, but that's when our one of my professors, he was there at the time in 2007 at LSU, and he decided, you know, these are a lot of these are really in our backyard. We should be trying to process these cases, trying to find out what we can. So he's the one who really built a lot of relationships with, you know, different newspapermen and different investigators in different places in Louisiana and western Mississippi. So we were actually investigating several different crimes, about 12 at the time.
When you said crimes, murders,
12
murders? Or?
Right, 12 different murders.
Of black people?
Right.
Of black men. Did you all solve any? Were any of these solved?
They haven't necessarily been solved in the sense that someone's been prosecuted and brought to trial. There's only been a couple examples of people being prosecuted, but they're usually old men. So the problem we're really dealing with now is that a lot of our witnesses, a lot of our perpetrators are actually deceased. So the longer it's been since these crimes, a lot of them are 50 years old, it just makes it that much harder to actually bring anyone to justice. So what we really took to be our role was just trying to find closure for families. That's really what we took to be our main role. And that's one of the blessings that Ms. Taylor was able to bring to us is she said, I have a story to tell. It wasn't necessarily, I know who died or anything like that. It was a particular case, but she approached us very bravely and wanted to tell her story about her father. It ended up helping us find out some things about some cases we had never even looked at.
Right. Can you tell us about any that you were able to
well, first, we were able to see the case she just told you about earlier about the Silver Dollar Group terrorizing a black family.
Right.
So the FBI would never be called in for that because no one was killed.
No one was killed, yeah.
But she was able to find the name of the young man from a school yearbook, you know, things like that. And we also were able to kind of investigate and see perhaps we could triangulate some information that she was able to give us about times, and then see missing black men or things like that might match a description.
Do you remember
of
the name Frank Morris when I talked about the store owner?
Mr. Morris was actually one of the more famous cases that we deal with, just because it was very visible. It was very publicized, and it caused outrage for a lot of people in the community. So
black and white, I understand about him.
Yes, ma'am.
Yeah.
Because he was actually one of the finest shoe shop owners in the area, and so
that was amazing.
White customers and black customers would come to him.
Yeah, Debbie, you remember going to his shop? You told me.
Right.
Y'all came down to his shoe shop.
Right.
And he and Urkel Boyd he had dinner at his house. I read from some writings. And so Urkel Boyd was upset that someone killed this black guy, and supposedly because he was dating a white woman.
Right. There was no proof of that, of course, but
Stanley may have a little more in his book now, with his investigations, I think.
Mr. Nelson's really got the most information on this topic of anyone.
And I just can't believe all these years no one has brought up more of the Silver Dollar Group. Everybody black I talked to, no one ever heard of the Silver Dollar Group. But that was the most malignant killing hate group of the Ku Klux Klan, is what they say. And it was just men who went out to kill, to rape, to just cause pain to other people for no reason. And he did the same thing at home. So Mr. Boyd, I understand, Urkel Boyd, or Cell Boyd is his name, he also was mean to his children, and his son told on him. So a lot of these guys, the children didn't like them because they were mean to them also. So you knew from a teenager that you were dealing with a sick man mentally, with all the hate in him. And that's why your mother left, right, Deborah?
Right.
Then you still have scars from this, don't you, Deborah?
Yes.
So do you have nightmares, or how has it affected you?
I've had to receive mental health treatment of my life for post-traumatic stress. I'm diagnosed as bipolar, and I expect it all comes from that.
Right.
Just no stability or love or anything except for my grandparents. So.
And you had to move a lot. Didn't you tell me you moved and houses were burned?
Yeah.
Do you think he was burning the houses for the insurance money maybe, and that's how you were living? Did he ever work?
Yeah, he worked hard. He worked in the woods hauling logs and took my brothers out of school, and I don't know.
There's a movie with Matthew McConaughey, Free State of Jones. Have you seen that, about Mississippi? About, people always think of all the whites in the South as having a lot of money. But they all didn't. The Free State of Jones shows that and this is a true story, that there were a group of slaves who had run away and a group of poor white people who the rich whites back in the Civil War used to take their land. So the rich whites were even mean back then to the other white people who had less than they had. And they united together, and they took over this town, and they called it the Free State of Jones for a while. That was before, back. It's a very good story. You may want to read that story. But Deborah, did you ever hear from your mother again?
Yes, I lived up in Indiana by her for several years. I was back and forth around mother.
Deborah, what's your goal now? What do you want to do? Are you trying to find out, is it a specific name that he killed? Is that what you're trying to find out?
The whole point of me telling anything was I want people to realize that it really happened. After David wrote the article, a lady wrote me and told me, thank you. She said, I've had people to tell me that none of this really happened, and I verified that it did. And I want people to know that it happened, talk about it, and in some way prevent it from happening again.
Did your father ever mention bombs? Because Ursula Boyd talked about bombs. Did your father ever keep bombs in the house? What did he keep in the house?
Daddy had we call them hand grenades and dynamite all at the house. He had oil and mustard, all kind of shotguns and weapons.
Did he ever tell you that these black people, I'm sure he called us niggers back then. I'm sure that's the word that was used. And did he say that they aren't worth having breath, or did he just say we're less than human? I mean, how did he talk about black people? How did they think? In his mind, he thought black people were like animals, right? That's why they didn't want him to touch their women.
I can't comprehend the hatred that people like him had. He seemed to think that the black people wanted to take over and we had to protect us from them and all that. It just was very bewildering. It still is.
So it's really white supremacy. He didn't want people to live together.
Right.
And you know, I think a psychologist would say maybe because he wasn't a rich white man, so
right.
white men probably looked down at him, and he needed someone
right.
to look down at. And you know, that's the impression I'm getting.
Right.
Deborah, you think that?
Yes.
Now, how long did
Definitely.
this last wife stay with him?
Probably 7 or 8 years.
No one could last there forever. What did he marry, 4 women or 3?
Well, he married one that was annulled, so I don't know if that's counted or not. So really just 2.
2 women? Okay. And Deborah, how old were you when you got away from him? How old were you?
15.
You left at 15. Where did you go?
To my grandmother's.
And she was a good person. Your grandmother and grandfather.
Oh yeah.
And that was his parents or your mother's parents?
That was his stepmother, but she raised him. And how he turned out like he did with having her for a step parent, I don't know, because she was an angel on earth.
Did she ever wonder what happened to him? Why was he so full of hate?
Everybody wondered why he was so full of hate.
Did he have brothers or sisters who were like him?
He had 2 sisters that were nothing like him, but and then he had some half siblings that we really didn't know. Mm-hmm. None of the family was like him.
Maybe it was almost like a gang. Maybe he got with this silver dollar group. I guess he was always with the KKK. I mean, he became a big thing with them. You know, it probably gave him some pride to put on a mask. You'll see somebody dressed like a KKK on the screen. And the silver dollar group was the elitist of the killers. And maybe, you know, it's obviously a very twisted mind.
Mm-hmm. Exactly.
A very twisted mind, yeah. But he needed to feel better than somebody else, I think, from what you're saying, because he hated everybody. He hated you. Any man that puts his own daughter in the bed with him and you have to run out is a sick individual. And these are the kind of people who think they're better than somebody else. That's amazing, isn't it?
I think it was a lot of desperation.
You told me something that really went deep and stuck with me. You said if he had been a loving father and had hated people, that I might have learned to hate them too, but by him hating everybody and mistreating everybody, I strove to not be like him, and that's the truth.
Yeah, that's Deb. We talked about that. If he had been a good guy to you, loved you, treated you well, and you would think, my dad is great. What are these people talking about? So maybe these black people are bad people. So he's right. You're right. He's definitely right with what he told you. What were you saying, David?
I was just saying your point about being the last on the totem pole.
Right.
I think a lot of these white supremacists feared that, and maybe still do today.
Right.
A lot of the people, it's an act of desperation to want to look down on someone so that you're not the least of the pack.
Right. And didn't you say, Deborah, it was always about the white woman? Didn't you tell me that? And I think I've read that before. They didn't want them mixing, you know, interracial marriages or dating, right? Well, he's probably...
Right, but he could have his daughter up in the bed with him.
Right. So I bet he's turned over in his grave now. Do you think he reformed when he passed? Do you think he asked God for forgiveness? Or he thought what he did was right?
I think he was probably scared and asked for forgiveness, but as far as being sorry, I can't imagine that he did. Some people said he did, but I don't think so.
How old was when he passed in '88, Deborah? How old was the man? Was he?
66.
Did he die from natural causes? Was he sick a long time?
Liver damage and heart disease and
He was a drinker?
alcoholism.
Was he a drinker?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. So Debra, you're a very courageous woman. We're going to have to start closing it down. Is there anything else you'd like to leave with the audience? And again, I appreciate what you're doing.
I wanted to know if I could mention the blog that my friend and I
Yeah, sure. Yeah, please do.
It's www.susangilley.com.
Yeah, I went in and read it. It's very good. If you want to know what some mean men were doing back in the 60s, please go read that, Bob.
And please read it and comment on it.
Yeah, I didn't comment. I'm sorry. I'll have to go back and comment.
We want to talk about this.
Okay. And Debbie, when I interview Stanley Nelson, I'm going to interview him. I'll bring you back on if you want to. The one who wrote, editor of Concordia Sentinel, who wrote the book, Devils Walking. And I think that's the last thing we can say. They were devils walking. Thank you, Deborah, and we'll talk to you. Thanks for being good enough, and now you know how to Skype.
Yeah, I do. Thank you, David. Thank you, Diane.
You're welcome, Deborah. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
That's a very powerful story. She's had a very tumultuous journey, and she still has come out, you know, trying to be a good person. And that's all we can do as we live this life, try to do the best we can do and try to help people. Thank you, David, for coming on to Diane Andrews in Black and White. And thank you again, Deborah. Bye-bye. See you next week.
Order your copies now of Diane Andrews' latest books, Third Man Out, a suspenseful mystery by Diane Andrews, and Gumbo for the Heart, 25 stories of faith, hope, and charity, both available now on Amazon.com.
Hello, my name is Debbie. Welcome to Debbie's Bridal, A Formal Affair.
My name is Raven. I work at Debbie's Bridal, and she makes your dreams come true.
No one can stop me when I taste the feeling. Nothing could ever bring me down. Nothing could ever bring me down. Taste the feeling.
At Gibson's Mobile Enterprises, you will experience high-quality mobile pressure cleaning services on your commercial buildings, fleet, residential, vehicles, RVs, boats, windows, and all types of concrete services. We are licensed and insured on all our services and have been in business for over 12 years.
Gibson's Mobile Enterprises. Find us on the web or call us today at 773-1476.
We are Gibson's Mobile Enterprises, where there's no limit to what can be clean.